Hi there, and welcome to another episode. So, we're going to look at cash today, and you've probably heard the phrase cash is king. And why do people say that? Why do they say cash is king? Well, in this day and age, the number one reason why people like cash is privacy, because people kind of know that their digital transactions are tracked, and who knows where that information goes. People like privacy, and I like privacy. I quite often use cash for that reason, because I don't want my transactions to be tracked. And again, I don't know where that information goes, that the shop owns, or even that my bank owns. I don't know if it's been sold or not. I've got no idea. I don't know if you've heard the term legal tender. So legal tender is a concept where shops are supposed to accept whatever legal tender is. And my understanding, and I might be wrong here, is that Bank of England notes are legal tender. I'm less sure about Bank of Scotland, Royal Bank of Scotland, Clydesdale Bank notes. I think, certainly I was told that legal tender is only Bank of England notes, definitely not Church of England notes, Bank of England notes. So that means that if you take a Bank of England note into a shop, technically they're not allowed to refuse you, because legal tender says that you should always be allowed to use cash in any shop. Now, we know that that obviously isn't the case, and I wonder if you've ever had any problems using cash. I know that I have. Examples being having to queue for tills because some of them are not for cash, and some of the automated tellers are not for cash, and often shops either don't have any tills open with real people, or they've only got one or two and the queues are massive. So either way, you've got a queue. And then you've got shops like Tim Hortons, which has gone cashless. And also there's that issue when you have something maybe big that you want to purchase, or perhaps you want to take cash out, a lot of cash out, and spend it over a period of time, that your bank wants to know what you're doing with that money. What are these big withdrawals for? It's really none of their business, because it's your money and you can do whatever you like with it. And you do wonder if there's a sort of war on cash. I think the post office had a campaign for a while to promote cash. I don't know if that's still ongoing, but I thought that was a good thing. However, I'm going to say something that is perhaps a bit controversial to freedom lovers. And this is it. Cash is not actually the answer to our problems. And the whole concept of legal tender is actually a terrible thing. So once upon a time, we here in Britain had what was called a hard currency, or a gold-backed currency. And coins were literal precious metals. So they were made of silver or gold. And so when you were buying and selling, you weren't using a token, which is what a £1 or a £2 coin are. You were literally using silver and gold to pay for your goods. And if you were using banknotes, these notes were promissory notes. And what that meant was that they promised to give gold to whoever had the note. You could just go into any bank, hand over your promissory note, and they would give you gold. Now, it's a bit different. Our coins are largely made of nickel, and if you've ever spent any time using cash, perhaps working in a shop or whatever, you might find that you've developed an allergy. And I know people who have got dry skin between their fingers because they're allergic to nickel. Sometimes you might actually see people wearing gloves who work in a till. For that reason, they're actually allergic to the nickel. But that is largely what coins are made of now. They're not made of silver or gold. And you might think, so what? We're doing quite well. You go to a shop, you see the price, you hand over your cash, or even you hand over your card or your phone to pay. It's all the same money anyway, so who cares? But actually, it's a huge concern that we don't have a real currency, because what the currency that we have, the pound. Now, it was originally pound sterling, so I imagine that had something to do with silver, because you've heard of sterling silver. But sterling has no link to silver anymore. It's actually an illusion. And in fact, our whole currency and our whole monetary system only has value as long as we continue to accept that illusion. And because our currency has no value, what that means is the government can print money at will. And this printing of money is called quantitative easing. It's actually a kind of counterfeiting. You know, if you or I just decided to print out pound notes, well, you get pound notes anymore, £5 notes, £10 notes, we would go to prison for that. But if the government does it, it's called quantitative easing, and it's fine. It's totally fine. But actually, it isn't fine. One of the reasons being that directly affects your life and mine is that this quantitative easing causes inflation. This is the direct cause of inflation. So actually, when you go to the shops and you see the price of cheese, for example, has pretty much doubled in the last 3 years, how could that have happened? Well, this cost of living crisis, as it's being called, that we're currently living through, was caused by all the money printing, quantitative easing that was done during lockdown to pay for those furloughs. So the cost of living crisis is caused by having a fake currency. So things like the people are upset because they think young people can't buy houses. That is a real concern. That is not a good situation to be in. We should all be able to buy homes to live in, and that they should become our property and solely our property, and not have to worry about losing our homes if the cost of living goes up. But it might interest you to know that if you were prepared to buy in gold, the cost of a house has not changed in 100 years. So the amount of gold that it takes to buy a house now is exactly the same amount as it took to buy a house 100 years ago. So 50 ounces is about £120,000. So a house that cost £120,000, i.e. 50 ounces of gold, that same house would have cost 50 ounces of gold 100 years ago. Okay, now the price of gold is going up. So if you watch this in a month's time, then the 50 ounces of gold will be probably worth £125,000, because that's how quickly the value of gold is going up. Or should I say, the value of the pound is falling, because gold is the standard by which we measure other things. The pound is not the standard, the gold is the standard. So it's not that the value of gold is rising, it isn't. It's just that the value of the pound is falling, and it has fallen considerably because you know that 50 ounces, £120,000 is not going to get you a great house. I'm getting myself all muddled here, but you understand what I'm saying, that the value of the pound, once upon a time, when I was growing up, for example, my mum didn't work, my dad worked for British Telecom, we lived in a really nice house that if a family was going to live in now, that same house, both parents would need to be working, and they would need to be working good jobs, lawyer, doctor, something like that, or working in finance or something. You wouldn't be able to buy a house, the house that I grew up in now, on a single salary from BT, unless you were like the managing director or something. Next door neighbours on one side, he was a teacher, initially, when they bought the house, she didn't work because they had children. So on a teacher's salary, no way you could buy that house. Other side of us, he worked as, I think, a dental technician. No way you could do that job and buy that house nowadays. So the value of our money has fallen massively. And these are just examples of it. So the concept of legal tender was introduced to force shops to accept fake money. It wasn't to protect us, the buyer, like we try and use it now. I don't want to pay by card because I want to protect my privacy. That's not the reason that legal tender was introduced. It was to protect the state as they were selling off our gold. And in fact, you might remember when Gordon Brown was Chancellor of the Exchequer, he was Chancellor when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, and Tony Blair came to power in 1997 and was maybe there for, I think he was there for more than 10 years. It was a long time. And so during that spell, so that's the late 90s, the early 2000s, Gordon Brown, as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, sold all our gold, and he sold it at a very, very low price. Right now, China is buying gold like there's no tomorrow. Now, there's lots of things that I'm not keen on about China, but that is an exceptionally good idea. They're buying incredible amounts of gold. Is our government buying gold? Not that I'm aware of. We've got very little gold in our vaults. So, it's not an ideal situation. Now, the pound is what's called a fiat currency. And the word fiat means let there be, as in the phrase, let there be light. Now that phrase, let there be light, in case you don't know, it comes from the Bible, and it's something that God said, let there be light. And he made light out of nothing. So when you say let there be money or let there be currency, you're making it out of nothing. Okay? Now, if you're God, you can make things out of nothing that have value. But we, as mere mortals, we can't make anything out of nothing. So if we've got a fiat currency, our fiat currency has no value. We can't make something valuable out of nothing. We're just not capable. So when people talk about a fiat currency, they mean a valueless currency. It has no value. Now, what is the solution to this? There's only one solution, and that is to go back to the gold standard. At this point in time, I don't hear of any political party that is interested in the gold standard. I know that people are fed up with the current political situation, which is why at the last election there, a lot of people voted for reform. Now, I'm not a fan of Nigel Farage at all, but I completely understand why people want to vote for reform. And I also know there is a movement to get, let's say, freedom-minded people elected in the Reform Party. And I have no objections to that whatsoever. But it would be great if some of those freedom-minded people would start thinking about the gold standard. So as a nation, the only solution to the financial problems that we have right now is going back to a gold standard. Now, it's a similar solution that you and your family can take right now to protect yourself from any future financial disasters. You remember that there was a financial crash in 2008? Well, what did they do? They printed money and gave it to the banks to bail the banks out. So what did that do? That reduced the value of our money. I don't know what would have happened if the banks had collapsed. It would have been interesting to see. But there would have been some, probably around that time, some kind of reset. Instead, what they're doing is just pushing the problem further down the road. So we're in a situation where the problem is being pushed further down the road. So in order to protect yourself from some kind of future crash, now I don't know that there's definitely going to be a future crash, but we cannot maintain this situation forever. So for you to protect yourself, there are two things you can do. Number one, get out of debt. And I hate to say it, but I include mortgages in that. I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey. He's all about getting out of debt, but he does not include mortgages in his debt. I would include a mortgage as a debt. I'm not going to say that that's easy, because most of us are hundreds, maybe not hundreds, but tens of thousands of pounds in debt because of our mortgage. Maybe some people are over £100,000 in debt. I don't know. I certainly don't have a house of that value. But I downsized. I moved to a smaller house in a not so affluent area in order to get rid of my mortgage. That's what I did. I don't have any regrets, and in actual fact, there's been a lot of pros to moving where I am, in terms of it's actually, I think, probably a safer area than where I was. That might be the way that you have to move, and that's not easy if you've got children. I completely get that, but if you definitely want to future-proof yourself, getting out of debt is your number one best way. And then your second thing is to buy gold. All of my savings are in gold, apart from a tiny little amount. They're all in gold. Most of it is in a vault in Blackpool, because my dealer is in Blackpool. I've got a very small amount in the house, in a vault in the house, so I've a safe. It's not really a vault. I was shocked. I decided I was going to buy gold. I bought a huge, about this size safe, and then discovered that the gold bars are like this size. So absolutely tiny. An ounce of gold is very tiny. So anyway, that's what I strongly recommend you do in terms of how to future-proof yourself. I know this is not really education, but I think knowing about money is of extreme importance, because I think as a nation we're quite illiterate. We don't know, we don't understand. We hear words like capitalism, crony capitalism, stakeholder capitalism, and crony capitalism, corporate capitalism, stakeholder capitalism are just euphemisms for fascism. A capitalist country has freedom. Capitalism equals freedom. So, anyway, that's all I have to say. I'm on the matter, and I hope you have a good week. Thanks a lot. Bye.